Hi, welcome or welcome back. In this video, I'll be showing you how to make this daisy top. It's super easy to adjust for size, and I show you how to do that in the video. It's a great project if you've got a lot of other things on because you can make all of the flowers individually and you don't have to cart the whole thing around all the time. As always, if you have any questions, leave them down below and I will get back to you. For this project, I used 3 different colours of 8-ply acrylic yarn, a 4.5mm hook, a pair of scissors and a darning needle. The yarn that I used is the Marvel 8-ply 100% acrylic yarn, and I believe 8-ply is also the same as DK or Aran weight yarn if those are the measurements that you use. And the ball is suggesting a 4mm hook, but I'm using one that is a half size bigger, so I'm going with 4.5. You could definitely make this project with less colours or more colours depending on what you want. Feel free to mix it up, but I'm using the same colour for all of the flower centres, the petals and then the outline. To start, you're going to get the yarn that you use to make the centre of the circles. So in my case, I'm using the gold colour, and you're going to grab your 4.5mm hook and make a magic circle. There are a few different ways to do it, but I like to wrap it around and make a cross. Go under the first layer, over the second, and pull it through, and then do a chain 1 to secure. So now with the tail facing this way, we're going to do 2 more chains. And now we're going to start on our double crochets. So we're going to do 12 double crochets into this center loop here. So for a double crochet, you need to yarn over, insert your hook into that center loop, yarn over, pull through, then yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2. So we'll do that again, yarn over, insert into that center loop, yarn over, pull through, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2. So now you're just going to go ahead doing double crochets into the center until you have a total of 12 double crochets. And I'm just doing my last double crochet. So now that we've finished 12 double crochets, you're going to grab that tail that's hanging out and gently tug it in. You want to tug it fairly tight to secure the middle of the circle. So now we're going to go into that first stitch that we did at the start, and I'm going to do a slip stitch. So to do that, you just need to insert your hook, yarn over, pull through, and then pull straight through that loop on the hook. And that's it for the center of our flowers. So I'm just going to pull through a bit and cut my yarn. So that's it. I found that the easiest way for this project was to do a few of each thing first. You don't have to do all of the ones that you're going to need, but it's much easier to not have to swap between yarn all the time. So if you want to, you can go ahead and do as many of these as you need to do. If you are making a small, you'll need 38 full flowers. For a medium, it's 42, and a large is 46. And if you want to make any sizes bigger or smaller than that, you can just take off 4 or add 4. But I will continue on now with the next color to show you what to do if you want to do them all in a row. Okay, so now you're going to grab your white yarn or your petal color if you're using a different color. And now we're going to make a slip knot to start. It doesn't matter too much about the size of your tail, but you don't want to be too short because you will want to try to tuck it in as we go. So now that I've done that, I'm going to put it on my 4.5mm hook, and I'm going to join on to the circle. You want to join on somewhere on the opposite side of where you finished your circle so that we can tuck in the ends as we go and it's not going to be super bulky in the one spot. So I'm just going to pick a random spot over here, insert my hook, and then I'm going to yarn over, pull through, and then pull through that loop on the hook. And now we're going to chain up 4. So 1, 2, 3, 4. And now we're going to do a double triple crochet. So to do a double triple crochet, you're going to need to yarn over 3 times. 1, 2, 3. And then we're going to go back into that same loop that we joined onto. So back in where we just came from. So we're going to insert, yarn over, pull through, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2, and yarn over, pull through 2. So that's a double triple crochet. I'll do that one more time. So we're going to yarn over 3 times. 1, 2, 3, and then back into that same loop that we just went into. Yarn over, pull through, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2, and yarn over, pull through 2. And now we're going to chain up 4 again. So 1, 2, 3, 4. And now we're going to do a slip stitch into that same loop that we just came out of. So insert your hook into that same loop, yarn over, pull through, and then pull through that loop on the hook. So that is basically 1 petal, and we're going to do 1 petal into all 12 of the double crochets that we did in this first round. So you're basically going to have 12 of these petals. So to move on to the next petal, you're going to insert your hook into that loop, yarn over, pull through, and pull through again. So we're just doing another slip stitch to bring us over to that next stitch. So now I'll go over how to do the petal again. So we're going to chain up 4, and then do a double triple crochet back into that same hole that we just came out of. Another double triple crochet back into that same loop, and now we're going to chain up 4 and back into that same loop again with a slip stitch, and then we're going to do a slip stitch into that next stitch across. So now you can see what the idea is going to be. I've done 2 petals into 2 of the double crochets from that first round. So you just need to go ahead and continue doing petals all the way around, and I will pause for a second here and show you what to do when you get to your tail, but you can just continue on doing 1 petal into every stitch, going all the way around, making sure that at the end you have a total of 12. Okay, so now I have done my first 6 petals and I'm up to the tail. So basically what you want to do is try to lay the tail along where you are stitching to make sure that it gets weaved in, and then you can just chop off the end if your tail is quite long, and it'll mean you don't have to weave it in later. So now I'm just going to go into that next stitch with a slip stitch, and I'm going to make sure that I keep this tail in close to my work. So now I'm going to chain up 4, do my double triple crochets into that same stitch, making sure that the tail is trapped. Then chain up 4 and move on to my next petal. So now you can see the tail is being weaved in. So just go ahead and keep going till you finish doing all 12 petals around. Now I've made it to the end of my 12th petal, and I'm just going to do my slip stitch like we normally do, and then I'm going to pull through a loop and cut it off. you can just go ahead and tuck in the tail as well, or you can do it all at the end, whichever you prefer. So now we're going to get started on the border for our daisy. So go ahead and grab the color that you're going to be using for your border. I am using this blue turquoisey kind of color. So for the border, you're going to make a slip knot, insert your hook and pull tight. So now all you have to do is pick the top of one of the petals. Because there were no joins along the top of the petals, it really doesn't matter which one you pick. Just pick a random one, and you want to go in between the 2 triple double crochets. So these are my 2 triple double crochets. I'm going to go into the loop that's in between them. I'm going to yarn over and pull through the loop on my hook. So now what we're going to do is chain 4. And now we're going to do a slip stitch into that next petal across. So making sure we're going between the 2 double triple crochets, I'm going to insert, yarn over, pull through again. And then I'm going to chain up 4 again. 1, 2, 3, 4. And now we're going to do another slip stitch into that middle stitch of the next petal. So you can just continue going all the way around, doing chain 4 and then slip stitch into the top of each petal until you get back to the start. So now I'm up to my last petal, and I'm just going to chain 4 and then do a slip stitch into that first stitch that we did off the first petal. So I'm just going to insert into both loops, yarn over, pull through, and then pull through 1. So now what we're going to do is we're going to do a slip stitch going all the way around into the back loop only. So into that stitch that we just went into, we're going to go in again, but we're going to go into the back loop only. So as you can see here, there is a little V made up by the stitches. This is the front loop here, and this is the back loop away from your body. So we're going to go into that back loop only, and we're going to yarn over, pull through, and then pull through again. So into that next V, you can see the front loop here and the back loop. We're going to go into the back loop only. So this is different for what we did at the start when we were doing our petals into the center of the flower. We went through both loops, but this time we're only going through back loops. So now you just need to go ahead and continue doing slip stitches into the back loop of every stitch. So now I've made it back to the start, and I'm just doing my last back loop slip stitch. And now I'm going to join on by going through both loops of that first stitch we did in this row. So I'm just going to insert through both loops, yarn over, pull through again, and then pull up a loop and cut off the tail. Alright, so now that is your completed flower. Now you can just go ahead and make 38 total full flowers for a small, 42 for a medium, or 46 for a large. Okay, so for our half daisies, you can actually see that it's a bit more than half because we do a full circle in the middle, but I'll show you how to do that. So we're just going to go ahead, make a magic circle, and do what we did last time. We're going to, once we've secured off our magic circle, we're going to chain up 2 and then do 12 double crochets going into the center of that circle. So go ahead and do 12 double crochets just like we did for the full daisy. Once you've finished your 12 double crochets, we're just going to pull tight like normal and join on to that first stitch that we did with a slip stitch. Now we're going to chain up 1 and secure. Alright, once you've got your full circle, you'll need to grab your petal colour. So just like we did for the full flower, we're going to make a slip knot, insert our hook, and we're going to insert into one of these sides. For this, in the previous one, you could start wherever you wanted because we were going the whole way around. But now that we're only going halfway around the circle, you want to start closer to the join to make sure that we cover it up and that it's not, the petals aren't over here and then this is exposed. So I'm just going to go into this stitch here, but you can pick any one around this side. And we're going to slip stitch. And then just like we did before, we're going to chain up 4. Do 2 double triple crochets. Making sure both the white tail and the gold tail are getting caught up in our stitches so that we don't have to tuck them in later. And 4 chains again. So as you can see, this is exactly the same as the full flower that we did. So you're just going to go ahead and do 5 more petals. So we're going to have 6 petals in total, basically half the number of petals that we had originally. So you can go ahead now and finish off doing 5 more petals so that you have 6 in total, and then join back on. Okay, so now I've finished my 6 petals and I've just done my last slip stitch. I'm going to chain up 1 to secure and cut off my tail. So now we're going to move into the border colour, which is that teal colour for me. So just like we did for the full flower, we're going to create a slip knot, insert our hook, and now for the full flower, we went into that stitch that's between our 2 triple double crochets. However, this time, because we're going to be coming around the corner and around the back, I'm actually going to start off in this chain. So into the 4th chain that we did, so we've got 1, 2, 3, 4. So into that 4th chain, I'm going to go through both loops. And then I'm going to do a slip stitch to start. So the same way we joined on before. And now I'm going to do a slip stitch into that next stitch. So to the one between the chains and between the first half double crochet, so slip stitch. And then we're going to do 1 more slip stitch into that stitch that we went into for the full flower. So now slip stitch. So now I'm going to chain up 4 and do a slip stitch into the center of the 2 double triple crochets, just like we did for the full flower. So I'm going to continue doing this all the way around, 4 chains and then a slip stitch. So keep going until you get to the last petal, which will be the 6th petal in this case. So now I'm doing my slip stitch into my last petal, and we're going to mirror what we did on the other side. We're going to do a slip stitch into the next stitch, and then another slip stitch into the top of that chain. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4. So into that top stitch on the chain, which should be the next stitch along, we're going to do 1 more slip stitch. So now we're going to go across the top. So we're going to chain up 5. Once you've got your chain up of 5, we're going to go into the center of the flower. So we're going to find that first empty stitch. So this is the last stitch that our petal went into. So this is the next empty stitch. We're going to skip that stitch and go into the next one along. And we're going to do a slip stitch. Now into the next 3 stitches we're going to do slip stitches. So just go ahead and do 4 slip stitches into the center of the flower in total. So we've got 1, 2, 3 and 4. And now we've got 1 stitch left that's empty, and we're going to leave that to parallel the other side, and we're going to chain up 5. And now we're going to join on to that first stitch that we did. So just going through both loops of that very first stitch that we did to join on. And slip stitch. So now we're going to do our row of back loop slip stitches going all the way around. So just like we did for the full flower, we're going to go into that first stitch that we just went into, we're going to go back in, but this time into the back loop only. And we're going to do a back loop slip stitch. Now into the next one. These first couple will be a bit more tricky to do because they're slip stitches rather than chains. But we're going to go all the way around doing back loop slip stitches just like we did for the full flower. So go ahead and continue going all the way around doing back loop slip stitches. And keep going along the top of the flower until you get all the way back to the start. And now I'm just doing my last slip stitch, and I'm going to do a slip stitch into that first back loop slip stitch that we did to join on. Now I'm going to chain up 1 and cut my tail. So that's it, that's our half flower, and you're only going to need 2 of these if you're making a small. You'll need 3 if you're making a medium or large. So just go ahead and make 1 more of these, and now I will show you how to configure all of your full circles and half circles to make the top. If you're making a small, you'll need to configure your daisies like this. You can see that one side has a higher neckline than the other side. This is so that you can reverse it and wear it with a high neck or a low neck, whichever you feel like. But if you know that you prefer high neck or low neck, you can make both of them the same. I've also drawn a mock-up of what a medium would look like. So you can see I've added 1 extra row to the panel with the high neckline, and then moving on to the large, I've added 1 extra row to the panel with the lower neckline. So all you'll need to do is to make a different size is to add an extra row to the side of the panel, alternating between the high neck panel and the low neck panel. I would also recommend measuring your panels against a top that you already have that you like the fit of, that's not too tight and not too stretchy. Once you've stitched all your daisies together in the size that you want, you'll then need to attach the sides together. You'll just need to stitch down each side, lining up the rows of daisies, and then you'll also need to stitch together the shoulder portions. To stitch your flowers together, you're going to need a darning needle and the yarn that you used for the border. So basically, to stitch the flowers together, we're going to need to cut off the chunk of yarn. So it doesn't matter if you need to use multiple pieces, but just make it long enough that it's not going to be too annoying to work with. So we're going to insert our yarn into our darning needle and insert into the top of where one of the petals is. So just into that back loop, I'm going to insert into where one of the petals was, pull through, and now I'm just going to tie a little knot to secure, and then we'll need to tuck in those edges as well. So now I'm going to grab another flower and I'm going to line up where the top of one of its petals are as well. And so I'm going to stitch into that petal. So now you're just going to go ahead and join the flower together until you get to the 3rd petal along. So we've stitched into the top of the 1st petal, go past the second petal, if you can see there. So we're going to stitch into the top of the first petal, go past the second petal and stop when we get to the top of the third petal. So it's basically going to be the same width as 2 full petals, but because we're starting halfway, we're going to go, so halfway through the next one is 1 and halfway through the next one is 2. So because there are 12 petals and each flower is going to be surrounded by 6 other flowers, we need to divide it up by 6. So that would give us 2. And because we're going from the top of the petal, that third middle is going to be 2. So now you can just go ahead and go through the back loops of every stitch. This should line up pretty well because we've done the same number of stitches in each flower. So we're just going to go all the way through the back loops, stitching them together. If you get up to the point where you have a tail, try to weave the tail in as you go. It'll save a bit of time and pain later on. So now you can see we've made it to the top of that third petal along, so it's joined like that. So now you just need to go ahead and stitch all of the petals together. So the next one, if you wanted to keep going with this same yarn, would be to join one on here, making sure that you start off in the middle of one of the petals and go both sides, and then just keep adding them on as you go. So go ahead and stitch them all together now. Okay, so now we are going to get started for the trim to go around the armholes and the neckline. So for this, I'm just going to grab the same color that I used for the border of the flowers, and we're going to start off by making a slip knot. Then you're going to insert your hook, and we're going to chain up 5. Once you've got your chain of 5, we're going to skip that first stitch and go into the second stitch from the hook with a slip stitch. So into the next 3 stitches, we're also going to do a slip stitch. So you should have 4 slip stitches in total. So now we've done our 4 slip stitches, we're going to chain up 1. Turn our work, and now we're going to start working into the back loop only. So you can see the little V here, we're going into the one that's furthest away from the body, so insert into that back loop only, and we'll do another slip stitch. So now continue doing back loop slip stitches all the way along, and you should have a total of 4 again. Once you've done 4, we're going to chain up 1, turn our work, and now we're going to continue doing back loop slip stitches until we have a total of 80 rows for the armholes and 140 rows for the neckline. So you should have 2 of these that have 80 rows and 1 that has 140 rows. However, when you get to the end, don't cut your yarn, because we're going to add one more step before we finish off the armholes and the neckline trim. So for each one, it's easier if you don't cut off and tie again. So go ahead and do the first one that you want to do, and then join back, and I'll show you the next step, and then you can go ahead and finish off the rest of the trim. Okay, so once you've finished your first section of trim, this for me is an armhole trim, so it is 80 rows long. So once you've finished your 80 rows for the armhole, or 140 rows for the neckline, we're going to join the 2 ends together. So to do that, we're going to need to line them up and make sure we're going through both sides, going through this side, and we're just going to go through that first stitch and then through the other side, and we're going to do a slip stitch. Now we're going to go in through the next hole and do another slip stitch. So you should have 4 slip stitches along here in total. Now we're just going into that last one. Now we've got our 4 slip stitches and it's connected together. So now what we're going to need to do is chain up 1, and we're going to open up our circle so that the section that we joined in on is on the back side. So this is the front side and this is where we'll be working in from now. So now we're going to do a single crochet into every row. So remember that each row there's a raised row and a divot row. So that's 1 row, 2 rows, 3 rows, 4 rows, and you need to go into the top of every single row. So we're going to go into that first row and we're going to do a single crochet. So yarn over, pull through 2, and then into that next row, insert yarn over, pull through 2. And now I'm just going to continue making sure that I do 1 single crochet into every row. So in total you should have 80 single crochets for the arm trim and 140 single crochets for the neckline. So just continue going around until you've made it back to the start, and I'll show you how to join on. I'm just doing my last single crochet, so for the armhole that would be number 80. And now I'm just going to go into that first stitch that we did and do a slip stitch going through both loops. So once you've done that, you can pull up a loop, and you want to leave a nice long tail because we're going to use it to stitch the armhole trim onto the actual top. Now you can pull it through. Once you've done that, you can go ahead and make the other 2. So I've got my armholes and my neck hole here, which is quite a bit bigger, as you can see. So now we're going to stitch these onto the top. I will show you how to do one of the armholes, but all of it is the same, so you can just go ahead and do it for all of it. So what you're going to do is grab your top, and you want it to be the right side out, so not inside out. And we're going to line up where we did that join, and that's going to line up at the bottom of the armpit. So that's going to be here. And I'm just going to use a stitch marker to attach them together. But if you don't have stitch markers, bobby pins work pretty well, or you could just use extra pieces of yarn. And then we're going to stretch it up to the top. And attach another stitch marker or way to mark your stitches. And now what we're going to do is we're going to flip it inside out, just the trim, not the top. So you flip the trim inside out so that the row of single crochets is against the front of the top. And now we're just going to take our darning needle and stitch it together. So all you need to do is go through the trim. You can go through both loops of the single crochets that we did. So through here and then into the back loop of the top. So you can see there you've got the V again. So we're just going to go into that back loop only on the top, but both loops on the trim. And you're just going to go all the way around, stitching the two together. Once you get to the join between two flowers, we're actually going to pull it a bit tighter, and I'll show you how to do that when we get there. But otherwise, just keep going all the way around. Now that we've got up to that join between the two flowers, we're going to make sure that we don't include the join in where we stitch it up. So we're actually going to try to pull it a bit straighter so that there's more of a straight edge, because obviously this is going to be straight. So we want to make sure that coming across the top, it's not super indented. I've gone through the second stitch here. So you can see this stitch here is being used to join them together. So I'm going to skip this stitch, and having just gone through that one before it, I'm going to now go to the other side, and this is being used to join them together. So I'm going to skip this stitch, and I'm going to go into that second stitch along. So we're going to go through the trim and then through that stitch and pull it tight. And so now you're just going to keep going ahead and doing that, and doing the same thing when you get to the join of all of the other flowers. So when you flip it over, you can see that it's a bit straighter across. We don't want the trim to be pulled down into the gap. If you need to put an extra couple of stitches to sort of close up this bit, you can go ahead and do that at the end. But just keep going all the way around, pulling the two flowers a bit closer together. You'll also want to make sure that you're stretching the ribbing evenly to make sure that it's not bunchy around the arm or the neckline. And also you'll probably need to put multiple stitches into the same stitch for some of the stitches that you do. It won't be exactly one for one. So once you've done that, you'll need to do the other arm and the neckline, and then that's your top. It's all finished. Thanks so much for watching. I hope you found this video useful. As always, if you have any questions, please leave them below in the comments and I will get back to you. If you make any of my projects, please tag me on Instagram at stephtashi_handmade.